let's get to part two. Part two is where do you want to dash and when to dash. Now, some of these things you heard from part one just because I was discussing the theory of the dashes, but here's I guess another explanation of it. But where to dash and when to dash. Okay, that's what I want to talk about. Part two, where to dash and when to dash. So where to dash, you see there's a common theme always. There's just this common theme about staying right outside of your opponent's furthest button. Staying right outside of your opponent's furthest button. These are where the fireballs are working. These are where the crush counters are working. These are where jump-ins are working. The cross-up jump-ins from the previous lecture. These are where dashes are going to work as well. So, number two on where, when to dash is you want to be dashing at the tense neutral. Again, another common theme here. When the neutral is very tense, they're more likely focused and afraid to press a button because of a crush counter. If the neutral is tense, if you guys are both trading off buttons here and there, life lead is very similar, and your opponent is also thinking about the fact of what if he dashes at me? What if he dashes at me? Maybe I should try to press a button to stop the dash. But by doing so, you open up the crush counter. You open up the crush counter. You open up the crush counter. Because he's afraid to get crush countered. When that tense neutral happens, and he's afraid to get crush countered. When you can also dash, number three, is when you are pressuring your opponent to extend your pressure. So Ken's pressure ends very quickly. Ken doesn't have continuous pressure like Karen, Cammy, Bison, all these other characters that have very strong, very good pressure when they're next to you because they can keep their pressure going. Whereas Ken takes a little more risk to keep his pressure going. So because of that, I think, is why he has the fastest dash in the game. So an example of how you can dash and when to dash to extend your pressure is something like this. You know, once you're a little too far to walk up throw or to walk up do anything really, you could continue your pressure. So let's say your pressure didn't work. Bam. You could do something like that. See, you don't even have to do it with the meter burn. You don't have to. You don't immediately dash. Watch. You don't immediately do that. You just take a pause to continue your pressure. Now, there are moments where, like I showed you earlier, where immediately dash on the first frame, a reversal dash. But again, you have to be feeling your opponent. You have to know, is he looking out for this? Because he could actually look out for this and hit you out of it. Because it's on the first frame. Essentially, you're reversal dashing. But if you wait a couple seconds, or if you wait a second, kind of makes it a little scarier. Like, what am I going to do? Am I going to walk a crush counter you? No, I'm just going to dash. Okay. Also, when you dash is when your opponent is trying to walk you down and you are defending, you can quickly sneak a dash throw or dash button. This works better with life lead, and be careful of taking this risk when you have life lead, because if you get hit, then you just blew your life lead. But this works pretty well when an opponent is doing something like this. That's just use a basic example like that. I want to show you that your opponent is walking you down and is pressuring you. Walking you down a little bit, but you're kind of max distance. You know, he's checking you. He's checking you with those buttons. He's checking you. A little, like right there, right there. Yeah, around that. You see him pressing those buttons. Bam. Okay, you seem to be walking me down. Well, I'm on defense mode, but are you ready? Let me know. Are you ready for that? You thought that you could walk up at me again. You thought that you could walk up at me again. You see how it caught his walk up? I'll show it again one more time. So, you know, you're walking down. This is after a few patterns. Remember, this is after some patterns that your opponent is showing you. It's not going to always look like this. This is your opponent's pattern, whatever it is. But he's going to be applying pressure in neutral like this. You see that walk up that he just did? Wasn't expecting that dash. Neither was I, but I just did it. However, if you get clipped into hit confirmed, then that's your fault. But essentially what you're doing here is you're turning your opponent's mind from offense to defense immediately. And that is a very hard thing for your opponent to react to. Very hard thing for your opponent to react to is turning his mind from offense to defense immediately. That's why those dashes work, because you're switching your opponent's mind if you do it properly. Okay, so let's go into that a little bit. So where do we want to dash outside of our opponent's furthest button? For most characters, it opens up your jump game with punish game. We discussed that in part 1. If you are dashing outside of their furthest button range, you get inside of their minds of the crush counter game, you get inside of their minds of the jump game, you get inside of their minds with the fireball game, you get inside of their minds with the walk up button game. You could do that. You could not dash, you could dash, but you give them an extra layer to think about. Think about it. All these lessons are the extra layers that you're placing inside of your opponent's head. Because if you never dash, then your opponent, if you never dash, and all you're doing is jumping, and all you're doing is just fireballs from right here, you're not making him, he has less thoughts in his head. You imply the dash, bam, more thoughts come inside of his head about the dash, because the dash opens up 10 other layers. See, just the way that a fireball opens up 10 layers inside of his head, you add a jump in, it opens up another 10 layers in his head. So let's say there's 20 layers now of thought going on in his head every second, and 20 is just a gracious number, but let's just say there's 20 thoughts just from the jumping and the fireballs that you threw. But now let's add in the crush counter game. Now you add another 10 layers in his head. Let's add the walk up button game. You add another 10 layers in his head of what could he possibly be doing. You add the dash game. It adds another 10 layers. So you're adding all of these layers in his head to force him to think about it. Dashers are very strong in this game, so that's something that is pivotal to your success in Street Fighter V. So like I was saying, you are adding the dash because it creates those layers. Number 2 on when and where to dash. When you dash is when there's a tense neutral situation. Tense neutral. Buttons are being pressed. Buttons are being afraid to be pressed. A lot of thoughts going on in your opponent's mind. What could he possibly do at this very moment? Force you to react to that. I'm going to force you to react to that. By the time you dash, he has to react to it. He has to be ready for this. Before you dash, he has to be ready for that. Because if not, you're getting away with this. When to dash. While you pressure your opponent to extend your pressure. That's number 3. Press a button. Oh, that's it? That's the only two buttons that I got? Okay, let me get back in there. Again, the two ways that you could do it is like this, where it's immediate, or... Oh, sorry. Or like this. Watch, you're going to see a lot of Ken players start doing that. I'm not saying this is the only way that you dash. Not after just these buttons. See, you can mix it up. You see? Multiple things that you could do. Stray hits. Extending pressure. And that's strong because your opponent is blocking. He doesn't want to get clipped by you pressing your offensive buttons, by you continuing to pressure him. He doesn't want to get clipped. So if you wait a split second and then dash, he's still probably in that defensive mindset, so it could work to extend your pressure. This is why, like, when you see Punk dash, why do you think it works so well when Karen dashes? Because this is all Karen is doing to you. That's all she's doing. Couple of buttons into dash. Couple of buttons into dash. That's Karen for you. Look at that. Tell me that doesn't look familiar to you. Tell me that doesn't look familiar. Like, come on. You're scared. You're scared of the medium kick. You're scared of the medium kick. He starts pressuring you. Bam. You're scared of the medium kick that he just dashed in. Okay, he's not gonna. Oh, you can't. What's going on? That's what you want your opponent to think. What's going on? I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. He's pressuring me. Press a button. Boom. Crush counter. Crush counter. Get away from me. Crush counter. I can't breathe. Crush counter. Okay. And last but not least, when you want to dash, when your opponent is trying to walk you down and you are defending, you can quickly sneak a dash. Throw. Just to recap that one more time. Your opponent is an offensive mindset, offensive mindset, offensive mindset, offensive mindset. You're defending here, right? You're defending. You're the one that's defending. You're defending here. Your opponent thinks he has some sort of control in the neutral. Maybe he thinks he has some sort of control. See? When your opponent's pressuring you, sometimes you can get away with these dashes. Alright, cool. I'll block. I'll take the throw if you throw me. But you're not expecting that dash right there. So that does it on part 2. Where to dash, when to dash.